Career, 52 Practical Answers to Your Questions. I'm Erin Wolfram. I own and operate Career Advantage and Career Advantage Golf, where I help people feel more confident and prepared throughout their job search by helping with things like resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, mock interviews, really just anything job search related. But each week in this podcast, I answer one question from the public, and this week's question is, after an interview, should I always send a thank you? And I feel like it is important to send a thank you after every interview, whether it's a screening interview or a final interview, a Zoom interview, phone interview, in-person interview. I do think that it's important to still send a thank you note of some sort. You might end up actually mailing a thank you via a handwritten card or a typed, professional note, or you could send a thank you via email. And the delivery method might depend on a couple of things. So one, you need to think about the timeline. So hopefully in the interview, when you were asking questions at the end, you asked about their timeline and when they would be making a decision, or what the next steps are in the interview process or application process. And hopefully you found out that information so you know their timeline and you know how quickly they're going to be making decisions regarding that next step or the actual hiring decision. If they are making a decision really quickly, it's probably best to send a thank you via email. Another reason why you might want to send a thank you via email is if you have interviewed for a position that is, several hundred or thousand miles away from where you live, because it might take a little bit longer for a mailed thank you to get to them. And you certainly don't want them to make a decision without receiving that thank you first. If you live in the same town or, within a few miles of where you've interviewed, then you likely could get something to them, relatively quickly as far as standard mail goes. But ultimately, you never know for sure, no matter where you're located and where they're located, when a standard mailed letter is going to arrive. So your safest bet might be to send a thank you via email. So a couple of other things to think about is, one, you really do want to personalize that thank you note and, put in a little bit of effort. So I don't recommend that you just send an email or write a note that simply says, thank you so much for interviewing me on Tuesday for the event planner position. I really enjoyed meeting you. Best of luck with your decision. It's not very personal. It doesn't say anything about you. It doesn't remind them anything about you. It doesn't reiterate your interest in the position. So if you're just going to send something generic like that, I would recommend not doing that. Instead, of course, thank them for their time and consideration. Remind them the position that you're applying for because they may have multiple openings. Reiterate your interest in the position if you are still interested, and if you're not, we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then finally, pick one or two brief things that you can mention that you really appreciated from your interview. Maybe information that they shared with you when you asked questions at the end, for example, or maybe somebody gave you a tour, or maybe one of the interviewers, provided you with some information on, some upcoming initiatives. Those are all things that maybe you didn't know going into that interview that you now know that just added to your interest in the company and the position. So you do not want to, recreate your cover letter. You don't want to write a novel. You still want to keep it short and succinct, but you still want to personalize it. So again, just to reiterate, thank them for their time and consideration. Remind them the position that you're applying for and reiterate your interest, and pick one or two key things that you learned from the interview that you really appreciated that you can just tell them that you've appreciated. Okay, so next, if you are going to write a handwritten card, just a couple of little tips. One, make sure it's legible. So if your handwriting is terrible, you might not want to opt for sending a handwritten card. You also still want to keep that very professional. So you also want the card itself to be professional. So just going with something, pretty basic, plain, with nothing in the inside that you can just write on would work best. You also can do a more formal typed letter if you're going to send something through the mail, and that's perfectly fine as well. Again, if you feel that a mailed thank you fits your timeline and what you're needing to do to get that information to them before they make a decision. So those are kind of my best tips for thank you letters, other than just simply sending one. The other thing is you do want to send it very quickly. So within 24 hours of the interview is what's recommended. So if you are going to mail something, certainly get it in as soon as possible, in the mail as soon as possible, so it's received quickly. And then as far as an email, you also want to send an email thank you within 24 hours as well. So don't sit on it too much. Once you're done with that interview, really process your thoughts. Think about what you want to include. Think about those, personalized pieces of information that you want to include to help them remember you and, leave them with a positive impression of you. I do also want to mention, after the interview, if you realize, or even during the interview, if you realize this position may not be the best fit for you, a thank you note is the perfect opportunity to let them know that. So you could send them a thank you via email, for example, saying, thank you so much for interviewing me on Tuesday. I really appreciated all the information that you shared with me. After further evaluation, I have realized that this may not be the best opportunity for me at this time, but I wish you the best in making your decision. So you always want to let people know as soon as possible if you're no longer interested in the position, because that's going to help them with their decision making. You don't want them to waste a lot of time and effort evaluating you as a candidate if you are not going to accept their offer. So the polite and respectful thing to do is to let them know, and you could certainly call them on the phone and let them know, or you could send a thank you email as well to remove yourself as a candidate. So those are some quick tips about thank you letters. If you have other questions about career development or job search skills or need any help at all, you can always contact me. My websites are careeradvantageresumes.com and careeradvantagegolf.com. You can also find me on social media on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm at Career Advantage Resumes, and on Twitter, I'm at Advantage Career. Thanks again for joining, and I hope everyone has a great day.